Sometimes wrestlers fight backstage. Yep, I get why it'll always be a massive news story because it raises so many questions, but let's not pretend this is anything new. You get that much ego in one room and eventually the fists are flying. It has been rife in the AEW locker room recently, but look, I am Simon from What Culture, please do subscribe. And yes, this is 10 wrestlers who beat the hell out of each other in all promotions all over the world. Number 10, Scott Steiner and DDP. Given that Scott Steiner is involved, it shouldn't come as too much of a surprise, especially as this was late 90s WCW Big Papa Pump. Dude was terrifying. DDP's name is a bit more of a surprise because Diamond Dallas Page is basically the savior of pro wrestling. If you have a problem or you're struggling, the master of the diamond cutter is there for you, with plenty of DDPY on the side. He is no mug though, so after hearing Scott say some disparaging words about his wife Kimberly in the year 2000, Page went to chat to him as you would. Sadly, as mentioned, Steiner was just nuts back then, and as the story goes, unleashed on Dallas so badly multiple wrestlers had to pull him off. This soon became part of wrestling folklore too, because Scott was suspended with full pay, so he got to go home and still receive his money. This sums up World Championship Wrestling at the turn of the millennium, but also reminds us all, don't mess with Scott Steiner, he will probably kill you. Number 9, Arn Anderson and Sid Vicious. Another one that has almost become a fable. This is crazy. Sometimes wrestlers just need a cup of tea and a crumpet, which is the most English thing I'll ever say. I don't even like tea. It didn't actually go down this side of the pond, as during a 1993 WCW European tour, Sid Vicious and Arn Anderson got into it big time in a UK hotel. Instead of just throwing some punches though, Sid turned up at Arn's room with a flippin' pair of scissors. And this was nothing to do with daddy ass, he wanted to stab him. Because this was Anderson, he just engaged in warfare with both guys getting stabbed, and my word, this could have been worse than it was. Thankfully both guys lived to tell the tale. The World Championship Wrestling didn't muck around this time. Vicious was fired and had his contract terminated, as it should have been. It actually showed real leadership as Sid was scheduled to face Vader at Starrcade 2 months later, which was a huge deal, but come on now, you do not attack someone with scissors. This was the talk of the town for many years, and again, we were lucky it didn't get any worse. Everyone just needs to calm the hell down. Number 8, Rick Rude and the Ultimate Warrior. Given how they both approach the wrestling business, this is not a massive surprise. Rick Rude cares about putting on the best matches he could, whereas the Warrior, well, I think he just cared about himself. Aliens, definitely aliens. According to the legend though, after the two had a match in 1989, Rick found the Ultimate One and told him he was too stiff and he needed to calm the hell down. Apparently the response from the Warrior was that he can do whatever he wanted, so Rude beat him up. Yep, I mean, how do you not see that coming? Once again, other wrestlers had to jump in to break this up, and given that other dudes, such as Andre the Giant, were also reportedly mad about how aggressive the Ultimate Warrior was in the ring, you'd have to imagine this was accurate. I mean, Andre got so mad, he whacked him during one of their matches. The one thing we do need to take from all of this, though, is that like Scott Steiner, you don't mess with Rick Rude, a man who rumoredly turned up to work with a gun in his car. Whoops. Number 8, Sammy Guevara and Andrade. So this is the one we were referring to during the intro, and it certainly does sound like there was an agenda here. We will never know what really went down, but after Andrade had done an interview where he said the only problem he's had in AEW is when Sammy Guevara moaned about the fact Mr. Tranquilo was too stiff in the ring, Sam barked back that Andrade was lying. Ruh-roh. They were both talked to the day before a Dynamite show and promised that nothing would go down when Andrade found Guevara and he punched him right in the nose. Now, there were stories that Sammy started this, but they sounded totally bogus. And when you do some more reading, it certainly felt like this was Andrade's way of trying to get fired. He wanted to go back to WWE. Now, all of that is speculation, but something definitely went down here. I mean, Andrade hasn't been seen since, and his contract tampering storyline was given to the firm instead. The real sad point is this came so soon after the Elite vs. Punk brawl, it was just bad timing. But hey ho, wrestlers gonna wrestle. Wait, number 6, Vince McMahon and NAILZ. It still amazes me that this one isn't talked about more. Maybe it's because NAILZ was a short-lived character, but this is exactly the reason why the real-life Kevin Wachholtz lost his damn mind. In 1992, though, the ex-convict was furious about his WWE payoff, so went and gave the boss a piece of his mind, and it got very bad. Because when NAILZ didn't get the response he wanted, he started to choke McMahon. Yep, his plan was to try and kill Vince. I mean, what are you doing? It then spiraled out of control as after the fact when Schultz claimed McMahon sexually assaulted him. But quite quickly, all of this felt like he was trying to get out of his own situation as best he could. It was thrown out, surprise, surprise, and when Kevin returned to testify against Vince in the infamous steroid trial, many experts said this was actually of detriment to the prosecution because it was clear NAILZ had a vendetta against the chairman of the board. You'll be shocked to hear he never came back to the company, and for goodness sake, whatever happened to a conversation? My word. Number 5, Booker T and Batista. Another fight that got quite the interest at the time. It's hard to figure out the truth with this one. So many different reports. One such tale is that in 2006, Batista and Booker T did come to blows, with Booker kicking his ass. This had come after Big Davis said he didn't want to go to SmackDown because it was full of B-stars. And who was on SmackDown? That's right, Booker T. Where the confusion comes in is that during a shoot interview way back when, Fit Finlay said the way he remembered was Batista getting on top of Booker and raining down with the punches. WWE had their own account too, which is that it was half of one and 6 a dozen of the other. But what we do know for sure is that this came down to respect and veterans. Booker T talked about that on his podcast. The best part today is that they are super friends and have buried the hatchet. And this is what we really should care about the most. Number 4, Chris Jericho and Goldberg. 2 more people who did kiss and make up. Goldberg was on Jericho's podcast in 2022 and admitted as such. In 2003, the mood wasn't as friendly. As the story goes though, after Bella joined WWE, some folk told him that Chris was bad-mouthing him. And rather than ask if this was true, Goldberg just launched himself at the Wizard and the fight was on. Amazingly, it does sound like Jericho got the upper hand here, even the former WCW World Champion said it, and given they did have similar beef in both promotions, I suppose this was finally coming to a head. When you hear them talk about it today, they both realize how silly this was, so all of it is done. A good life lesson for us all there. Even if things do go bad, dust yourself off, make buddies, and get back to what's important, eating pizza. Number 3, Chris Jericho and Brock Lesnar. So Chris Jericho is just the secret toughest dude there is. Or he doesn't care. Goldberg, Lesnar, if you piss him off, he will stand up to you. Gotta respect it. As Jericho was watching Brock destroy Randy Orton in the SummerSlam 2016 main event though, he worried something had gone awry. After all, this was the Beast busting open Randy for real, and well, that's not wrestling. As it turned out, Vince McMahon had approved this, but as Chris didn't know, he stormed to the gorilla position and demanded an answer. When no one gave him one, he got in a just back from attempted murder Lesnar's face and was ready to go toe-to-toe. Now even Jericho knows he probably would have been killed here, but he did not care. Didn't think it was right. The story goes that Brock actually kissed Chris on the forehead as if to say, let's go. Now, thankfully, this was calmed down as people were informed. Yes, it's a work. Can you imagine if this did kick off and Jericho somehow choked him out? I know it's super unlikely, but we'd be talking about it forever. Number 2, Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. I mean, where do we even start? This was so out of control, we still talk about it 20 years on, and I bet if you jump forward another decade, the chatter will remain. Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart hated each other. It got so bad it resulted in the Montreal Screwjob, but before that the two came to blows in June 1997 after the Heartbreak Kid had dropped some serious allegations against the Hitman live on Raw. I mean, that was never going to end well. It led to a bust-up backstage with Bret yanking at Shawn's hair so hard he pulled an entire clump out. This sent Michaels livid, who burst into Vince McMahon's office with the damn hair, slammed it on the desk and said he was quitting because this was an unsafe working environment. By all accounts, Hart really kicked HBK's ass here too, but once more. They're pals now, which is so important. No one needs to be walking around with that stuff on their shoulders. It's not healthy. Number 1, CM Punk and the Elite. Get this. This story took over the internet to such a degree, it did more traffic than Vince McMahon leaving WWE. I mean, that is all I've got. I suppose there's still so much intrigue, because as of me talking, we still don't know the fallout or what exactly happened. Did the Young Bucks kick the door down? Was Kenny Omega bitten? Is Punk threatening to sue? You can try and piece together a lot of the evidence, but the only people who know for sure were in the room is wild. The fact this lot got into a scrap to begin with seems bizarre, because even though tempers can flare, they just don't see the type. I get yelling and screaming, but throwing a fist? I would assume none of this was good at all. My dream is that they all get back on the same page so they can return to AEW and entertain the fans, because that's what wrestling is all about. Before all that, let's hope they find peace, though. Nobody, and I mean nobody, needs this. Know of any other wrestlers who beat the hell out of each other backstage? Make sure you let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Then head over to whatculture.com where you can read yourself some articles. Make sure you come follow us on social media at WhatCulture WWE and Simon316. And look, I've told you once, I'll tell you for the 782nd time, we got more videos, and they need to be watched. My name is Simon for What Culture. Thank you very much for joining me as always, and if you've been asking yourself the whole time, does he love me? The answer is yes, you're my one and only.